Before we begin, take a moment to support the channel. If you enjoy cultural stories like this one, consider liking the video and subscribing. It helps these stories reach more people and allows the channel to continue exploring life across different cultures. The contrast often becomes visible before the details are understood. Australia presents itself as familiar yet subtly resistant to American expectations. The language sounds the same, the cities appear modern and orderly, and the cultural references feel recognizable. Yet beneath this surface similarity, a different rhythm quietly asserts itself. The environment does not rush to accommodate newcomers. Instead, it continues at its own pace, indifferent to comparison. This is where many Americans begin to sense that relocation has not led to an extension of home, but to a system with its own internal logic. Early impressions are shaped by atmosphere rather than events. Australian cities tend to feel calmer, less performative, and more self-contained. Public spaces are quieter, interactions are more understated, and displays of ambition are often muted. For Americans accustomed to overt enthusiasm, verbal affirmation, and constant motion, this restraint can feel like distance. Social warmth exists, but it is rarely immediate or expressive. Politeness replaces friendliness, and neutrality often replaces excitement. The result is an emotional landscape that feels controlled. Even reserved daily life reinforces this impression. Workplaces operate with fewer visible hierarchies, but also with fewer incentives to stand out. Long hours and overt competitiveness are not universally admired. Instead, balance is treated as a social norm rather than a personal goal. Many Americans notice that effort does not automatically translate into recognition, and that productivity is not always the dominant measure of worth. The culture quietly resists hustle, framing it as unnecessary rather than admirable. This difference extends into social behavior. Conversations tend to be understated, humor is dry and self-deprecating, and strong opinions are often softened or withheld entirely. Confidence, when displayed too openly, can be interpreted as arrogance. Americans who are used to being encouraged to speak up, sell themselves, or lead with certainty often find that these instincts generate discomfort rather than connection. Adaptation requires learning when not to speak, when to downplay success, and when to blend rather than differentiate. Over time, these subtle pressures accumulate. The realization emerges slowly. Australia is not a place that rewards intensity in the same way. It does not respond to urgency, personal branding, or visible ambition with enthusiasm. Instead, it prioritizes equilibrium, social ease, and emotional moderation. For many Americans, this becomes the harsh truth, not that life is worse, but that the rules governing validation, belonging, and success operate on an entirely different frequency, one that cannot be forced or accelerated. This adjustment is rarely immediate because the contrast is not dramatic or confrontational. There are no clear moments of rejection, no explicit signals of exclusion. Instead, the difference reveals itself through absence. Invitations are infrequent, feedback is minimal. Emotional reactions are subdued. Many Americans notice that enthusiasm does not echo back, that urgency meets calm resistance, and that passion is met with polite neutrality. The culture does not push back aggressively, it simply does not respond. Social integration highlights this gap further. Friendships tend to develop slowly, often anchored in long-standing networks rather than spontaneous connection. Casual friendliness exists, but it does not always translate into closeness. For Americans accustomed to rapid bonding through shared experiences, open conversation, or emotional disclosure, this pace can feel isolating. Relationships are built through time, consistency, and shared routine rather than verbal affirmation. Trust is implied through familiarity, not declared through words. Even leisure carries a different emotional weight. Outdoor culture is central, but it is approached without spectacle. Beaches, parks, and natural spaces are treated as extensions of everyday life rather than destinations for escape or achievement. There is little sense of conquering nature or optimizing free time. Activities are undertaken quietly, often without documentation or display. For Americans shaped by a culture of maximizing experiences, this understated enjoyment can feel oddly anticlimactic. Institutional systems reinforce the same pattern. Rules are followed without drama, authority is present but unobtrusive, and public behavior leans towards self-regulation rather than enforcement. There is less tolerance for disruption, but also less emphasis on control. Americans often recognize that assertiveness, which at home might signal confidence or leadership, can here be perceived as friction. The expectation is cooperation, not persuasion. Gradually, the emotional cost becomes clearer, the effort to calibrate tone, soften expression, and restrain intensity requires constant awareness. Many Americans discover that they are not being misunderstood, but accurately read within a cultural framework that values emotional containment. The challenge is not language or logistics, but internal adjustment. Australia does not ask newcomers to change explicitly. It simply continues to operate as it always has, revealing over time how deeply cultural assumptions shape comfort, connection, and identity. The longer this pattern persists, the more it reshapes expectations. Many Americans eventually recognize that adaptation is not about mastering etiquette or understanding humor, but about recalibrating internal standards. Success feels quieter, belonging feels less declared. Approval is rarely verbalized. Australia offers stability, safety, and a high quality of life, but it withholds the emotional feedback loops that Americans often rely on for reassurance. Achievement is allowed, but celebration is restrained. Confidence is accepted, but only when it remains understated. This realization can be disorienting. Without external affirmation, motivation must become internal. Without constant social signaling, identity becomes less performative. Some Americans find this grounding, even liberating. Others experience a subtle erosion of momentum, a sense that effort dissolves into neutrality. Neither response is wrong. Both are shaped by a cultural environment that values sameness over distinction and cohesion over visibility. Over time, many Americans notice a shift in their own behavior. Speech becomes softer, reactions become measured. The impulse to explain, justify, or impress gradually fades. Australia does not demand reinvention, but it rewards restraint. Those who remain often adopt a quieter presence, learning to exist without urgency, without constant comparison, and without the need to be seen doing well. Life becomes less about progress and more about continuity. The harsh truth, then, is not rooted in hardship or hostility. It lies in the realization that comfort does not always feel energizing, and that peace can feel unfamiliar when it arrives without praise. Australia reflects back a version of life that is steady, controlled, and emotionally even. For Americans shaped by intensity, affirmation, and forward motion, this reflection can feel unsettling. Yet within that discomfort lies a deeper understanding of how profoundly culture shapes not only behavior, but the emotional architecture through which meaning is felt and measured.